Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you today in conjunction with Iconic Offices and Trainmate. Um, my name's Kate McDaid, and today I'll hopefully give you some ideas in and around your nutrition, easy kind of wins when it comes to what you're doing on a day to day basis to really support what you're doing to get the most from it, and I suppose to reach your potential on your daily tasks each and every day. So to maybe give you a little bit of an insight into just who I am before you sign away the next 30 odd minutes to me. Um, I'm a health and performance nutritionist. I did my master's over at Loughborough University in the UK in sport and exercise nutrition. And in 2017, I came back to Ireland after working in the UK for a number of years with different clients over there in a consultancy to found NutriKate. So there, my team and I work with an array of individuals, corporates, and sports teams. So the likes of Dublin GAA, Motorsport Ireland. We work with the elite scholars at Trinity. So it's quite a mixed bag. So we're working with people who maybe want to improve their health or change their body composition in some way. And then we're also working with elite and amateur sports players. So it's mixed bag, but I feel very grateful to get to do what I get to do. So it's enough about me. We will move on to the interesting side of today's seminar. So I suppose first and foremost, I just want to get you guys thinking about maybe why we should give some consideration to, I suppose, the different eating patterns or the different food choices that we make on a day-to-day basis, and really why nutrition is worth considering in any shape or form. So some of you, I'm sure there's plenty springing to mind in terms of what you think, why there might be weight in this, but maybe it's no harm to go through a few things just to maybe create a bigger picture and to give you a wider insight into all that really nutrition is affecting on a day-to-day basis. So I suppose energy levels for one is something that it's going to influence. Now that things are finally opening up, we're going to be on our feet probably a lot more, running in to the office now versus maybe staying at home, and running from A to B. So energy levels play a huge factor, I suppose, in how well we feel on a day-to-day basis and how much we get through. Nutrition is going to affect our performance. So I mentioned that, at NutriKate, we work with teams, and very often performance is associated with athletes and what someone's doing in a swimming pool or on a pitch or whatever it might be. But we need to perform every single day, in terms of how we interact with one another, whether it's clients, whether it's colleagues, family, housemates, whatever your situation, you're performing each and every day to get the most from you as the individual that you are, but also work and hobbies and so on and so forth. So I want you to start looking at performance in, I suppose, maybe a broader sense. It really does apply to all of us, whether we're running around a pitch or not. Another side, I suppose, or another area that nutrition will have an influence is our immune function. And obviously, the last 2 years, maybe this has been a bit more of a hot topic than normal. But making sure that we're not coming down with colds and flus more than we need to. So it is a part of life that those things can occur, as we well know. But can we support ourselves maybe a little bit better so that we aren't maybe feeling more under the weather than we need to, and we're not kind of adding to those incidences. Healthy aging is another side that nutrition will contribute to. Same with skin health, gut health, which is, I suppose, we're learning more and more about, but that will have a huge influence, or we know it's very tightly connected with our brain health, and they have a very strong connection with one another. So I suppose if we can support our gut health, that will have a positive knock-on effect on our overall well-being. And sleep would be the next side of the coin. We won't get to touch on sleep today. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead here. Sleep today, because it's could do with a presentation in and of itself. But nutrition, I suppose, what we're eating, what we're consuming, will have an influence on how well we're sleeping, and in turn, how well we're sleeping will have an effect on the food choices that we make, our appetite, and so on and so forth. And then mood. So our nutrition will have an effect on our mood. So again, if we think about that performance piece, I suppose the better we feel, and I suppose the more robust we feel, the better we can maybe deal with different situations that arise, and so on. So there's plenty there. Some of them might have sprung to mind straight away for you. Others, maybe this was a nice prompt, but hopefully you can see here that there's lots of benefit to get for maybe paying attention to what we're doing on a day-to-day basis in a nutrition capacity. So to make sure that we are all on the same page, I wanted to fly through some of the basics. So when I mention basics, what I mean is things like carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. There can maybe be some ambiguity between what's what they do. Should one get the boot entirely, or what is the story to help me support my health and my well-being? So hopefully I'll be able to clear that up a little bit more for you today. Whatever is kind of thrown your way in today's session and whatever is discussed, it's really, really important that it's taken, I suppose, in the context of you being the individual that you are. So some things are going to resonate with some of you more than maybe they might resonate with others. Really important that you start looking at what we discussed today in the context of your life, what you're looking to get from it, and where you're at, and I suppose all the different factors that maybe are affecting the choices that you make. So just important to recognize that, whether I suppose the individual element that will have an influence on things like our preferences. So that's one side of it, but it'll also have an influence on, how much energy we require on a day-to-day basis. So things like our weight, maybe different goals that we have from a physical standpoint, or indeed a performance standpoint. Our height is going to influence our requirements, our age, gender, our physical activity levels. So I mentioned, things are opening up. Does that mean that you're on the move more? Are you now coming into the office? How are you going into the office? Are you walking in? Are you cycling in? So what's your activity like away from maybe typical training? And then your exercise load. So indeed, if you are involved in different sports, or you've got a hobby that's physically demanding, is your training load maybe more intense than what it has been before, and do you need to adjust your requirements as a result? But really important to recognize that, from our energy requirements right through to our preferences, and even, our gender and so on, that will all influence what we need and what we should be looking to get from our diet and indeed our nutrition. So really important that we start, I suppose, taking note of what actually is working for me, what's not. Is what's working for Mary or John down the road really beneficial, and the right option for me and what I'm doing? So we can absolutely learn from one another, and friends and families and members and so on, but it's important that we don't ever lose sight of, well, actually I'm a different entity altogether. So if something's not working, even if it is for someone else, that's all right. I'm just going to learn and adjust from that. So I have a few questions darted throughout just to keep everyone on their toes and to get maybe a bit of discussion. So I am more than happy if you want to take yourself off mute and chime in with maybe different thoughts that you have, or with your answers. Or I'm absolutely happy for you to, I suppose, reap the benefit of sitting behind a screen, and that you can shout in the comfort of your own office or your own home in peace. So whatever you want to do. There's also a chat box, so if you want to throw your answers in there, that's absolutely perfect. Whatever you're most comfortable with. So I suppose the first question of today: true or false? Do we think that carbohydrates are the most energy dense macronutrient? Would you say that is a true or false statement? Oh, and the chat box it's going 90 already. So we've got true. I'm sorry, I see some questions there, so I'll get back to questions at the end, so I won't leave you hanging on those ones. True. Okay, so we're all kind of thinking true. So thank you for sharing those. It's actually false, lads. So but that's a very common misconception. So when we actually look at, I suppose, how much calories we're getting per gram when it comes to protein, carbohydrates, and fat, you'll see that carbohydrates and protein contain 4 calories per gram, whereas fat contains 9 calories per gram. Now, why is that relevant? That's not to say that anything's better than the other. Hopefully, you'll see that every macronutrient has a role to play, but maybe that's important from maybe a portion control standpoint. So maybe in that context, it's worth understanding fundamentals in that respect. So carbohydrates, they very often get a bad rap, but there's plenty of benefit to them. And I suppose, again, context driven in terms of how active you are might dictate how much carbohydrates need to be in our diet, in the sense that the more active that we are, the more we're involved in high intensity exercise, the more they should, absolutely feature. But they do have a role to play in all our health. So in the sense that they'll support our immune system, they're going to support our strength and recovery, they'll support our endocrine function. So that's things like our hormones, our metabolism. They will supply us with different vitamins and minerals. And as I mentioned, they're super important from an exercise standpoint. So if you're someone who's recently taken up running, or you're doing cycling and you're going out for, whether it's 5, 10K, or you're going out for a few hours on your bike, if that's new, maybe carbohydrates need to be introduced more so than what they were before, because don't forget, your energy requirements are going up as well. So that needs to be matched in the context of your diet. So when we're looking at carbohydrates, in terms of getting most bang for buck and the most maybe nutrient dense options, you're looking at things like your fruit and veg, your oats, you're looking at your white or sweet potatoes. There's not one better than the other, despite maybe what we've heard before. Your rice is a good option, basmati or brown. So there's plenty of options there. Things like bread and pasta, absolutely perfect sources of carbohydrates, and can be included in your diet for sure. They tend to be maybe less nutritious in comparison to maybe what you see on your screen, but absolutely can play a role. But if you're depending on those sources, or indeed any source, maybe over and over again, let's look to try and get a bit of variety in there, because the more variety we get into our diet, the more likely that we are of meeting all our different nutrient needs. Okay. So then protein's another one of the macronutrients that, again, can sometimes be associated with, well, athletes need protein, maybe not me so much, but protein's super important for us all, because that's going to support our muscle. Our muscles are healthy tissue, and all of us have it, irrespective of how active or otherwise we are. Protein's actually going to support our bone health too. So that's super important, again, for all of us. It's going to support our immune function. It helps promote satiety. So it helps us feel satisfied after we eat. Nothing worse than getting up from the dinner table and you feel like, probably could sit down and have another meal. So including some protein there can maybe make you feel a bit more satisfied. Really important from a recovery standpoint. So whether that's day to day, or again, if you're highly active, that might, be even more important again. And it's going to support our healthy aging. As I mentioned, it's going to support things like our bone health. So really important that we're getting some protein in our diet day to day. So again, bang for buck. What are the most nutrient dense options? It's your poultry, it's your red meat, it's your fish. Red meat being, I suppose, lean cuts of red meat, butcher cuts, and so on. Tofu then, or legumes, can be a good option for the likes of those of us who are looking for plant-based alternatives. Ideally, you're looking to include protein, at least in each of your main meals. So if you're having breakfast, lunch, and dinner each day, can we get some sort of protein source in there? So that might be one take home for you today. If you're not doing that, maybe that's an easy win for you for the reasons mentioned. Ways, I suppose, you can bulk up meals that you're currently having, or adding, if you want to, maybe improve the protein quantity of those meals. You could look at adding things like beans to maybe the slice of toast that you're having. You might have a glass of milk with your meal. Making a simple swap from regular yogurt to like a Greek yogurt or Icelandic yogurt is a really easy win in terms of helping bump up your protein intake. Nuts and seeds, while they're predominantly high in fat, they will support your protein intake, because they will provide you with some protein. Lentils, beans, butter beans, and so on, they're also predominantly carbohydrates, but they do provide us with some protein too. So there, there's ways kind of around it. You don't need to rely on the likes of chicken and fish and so on the whole time. We can, use different techniques to bump up our overall protein intake. And I suppose just to give you an idea of ways in which you might just do that. From, I mentioned, can we include protein in our main meals? Maybe it's a case where, okay, I wasn't so good at adding protein in at lunch, but I can get it in a snack. So I'm going to have some Greek yogurt with some nuts and berries in a snack. So this isn't going to be ideal for everyone, but it's more so to get you an idea as to what this actually looks like in real life, if that makes sense. So we can take maybe the theory into reality. And then as we go into the final macronutrient, which is fat, I'm going to hit you with a question, if that's all right. What do we think is a good daily intake of fat? These are percentages of your overall energy intake. Okay, so when we're dealing with fat, we don't go in how many grams should we be aiming for in the day, the way we might with other nutrients, but we work off a percentage basis. So do we think that, if I look at my overall energy intake, a good daily intake of fat would be less than 5% of that? Do I think it's B, less than 10, C, 10 to 15%, or D, 25 to 35%? And I can see again, the chat box is hopping. You guys are on the money today. I love the interactive element. Thank you. So we've got a few Bs, we've got Cs, Ds, we've got it depends. So we've got someone now who's on the fence and is on a good train of thought, to be fair. Okay, so it's a mixed bag. We're undecided as a group. So if you said D, 25 to 35% of your overall energy intake should be coming from fat, you are in the right kind of thinking space. Similar to carbohydrates, sometimes fat can get, maybe it has a bit of a bad reputation, but there's lots of benefit in including healthy sources of fat in your diet on a day-to-day basis. One being it's an energy source, so it's an alternative energy source to maybe carbohydrates. It will provide us with different vitamins and minerals, vitamins that we can only get from high-fat foods. Again, it will support our immune function. So notice how protein, fats, and carbohydrates now are all supporting our overall health on a day-to-day basis. And it's also going to support our hormone production. So as you can tell, super important for all of us that we're getting some sort of fat into our diet day to day for those reasons. So again, nutrient dense sources are the likes of your olives, olive oils, nuts and seeds, oily fish, avocado, flaxseed. So we want to ideally aim for about 30% of our total energy coming from fat. And I suppose ways that you might be able to bump things up a little bit if you're not too sure are, doing things like adding maybe nuts to your yogurt, or some flax seeds to your porridge, or a nut butter to your porridge even in the morning, provided you're having porridge. You don't need to have porridge, but I know that can be a common choice, particularly on these cold mornings, or including oily fish. I've mentioned oily fish, maybe a bit more specifically, in that the aim would be to include oily fish more than twice a week, because they contain omega-3 fatty acids, and they're essential fatty acids that we actually we can't make ourselves. We need to get that from our diet. So that's something worth considering, because they play a really important role in our overall well-being. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of maybe the role that each of the macronutrients play, and why it is important to get them into our diet in some shape or form on a day-to-day basis, or where it's within our control. Fruit and vegetables then, super important piece of the puzzle too. So they're worth touching on. And I suppose on this front, do we think fruit should be avoided due to its sugar content? Because I know that's quite prevalent, and that's something that I get asked quite regularly. What about the sugar? What about the sugar? So do we think this statement is true or false? Mm, mm. False, false. Okay, you're all coming in with false on that one. So that was unanimous. And you're right, because while it does contain sugar, There's so many benefits, and they far outweigh any negative that the sugar could contribute. So those positives include things like they provide us with different vitamins and minerals. They're packed full of fiber. As those of us living in Ireland, over 80% of the population don't meet their fiber requirements. I mentioned at the beginning of today's session the role that gut health can have in our overall well-being. Fiber is a super important element of gut health. So we want to make sure that we're meeting our fiber requirements on a day-to-day basis. So meeting our fruit and vegetable intake can really help us on that front. Because they're rich in different nutrients, they help us limit the risk of being deficient in anything, which in turn helps reduce our risk of injuries or illness. And I suppose, again, going back to the variety piece. So it's the same in the sense of the protein, fat, and carbohydrates. I put up examples of maybe what the most nutrient dense options are. So if we're relying on one or two quite heavily, well, maybe we can spice things up the next time we go to the shop and try and, oh, I actually do like seeds and I forgot because I've just gotten into a habit of eating, my normal meals and routine. So I might add them into the shopping trolley the next day. The same is applicable to the likes of your fruit and veg. We want to try and get a bit more, I suppose, diversity on that front too, because different colors provide us with different nutrients. So ways we can do that. Frozen is just as good as fresh. It can be maybe more cost effective, and it can also help limit any kind of food wastage. And from a food wastage perspective, that's becoming maybe more of a problem because about a third of the food that is produced actually goes to waste, which is wild when we think about all the food that is produced and how much will be going to waste as a result. So that might be an easy way for you to maybe improve that side of things if you find that, oh, I'm really make an effort from a fruit and veg standpoint, when I go shopping, but then it gets to day 4 and I'm throwing out half of it because it looks a bit worse for wear and I don't want to go near it. So we've been there. So maybe including some frozen options might be a good way to maybe limit that. So you can do a mix between the two. Smoothies, a great way to improve fruit and vegetable intake in that we can add something like kale or spinach in with your favorite berries or fruits, and they kind of get masked in that sense. That could be a nice one for anyone who maybe has kids who are a bit picky as well. Homemade food, so making chilies, curries, you can dictate how much vegetables are going in there. I did a cook along last week. We made a curry, and the take home from the group was, I can't believe how many vegetables are in this. So you can really plow it full of vegetables. You're in control of that. And again, something like curry can kind of make everything taste nice, like that flavor. So again, if there's something that looks like it's on its last legs in your fridge, chuck it into the curry, and you're limiting that kind of food waste element. And then cooking methods. So sometimes people don't make a great first impression, but you stick with them, you give them the benefit of the doubt, and then they end up being a great part of, I suppose, your group or whoever it might be. Let's look at maybe being adventurous and doing the same with our vegetables. So if you say, for example, I hate carrots when they're boiled, but you've tried them roasted now and it's a game changer. They can be introduced that way. So try and maybe different methods when it comes to your vegetables in particular to see if that makes them more palatable and more enjoyable, and to help you maybe with a bit more diversity in your diet. The aim of the game when it comes to fruit and veg is to get 6 or more portions a day. So some of you might be, eyes wide and going, oh my God, I'm way off the mark with that. Well, first and foremost, before anyone starts panicking, what is a portion? So we're looking at things like 2 small fruits, a banana will be a portion, a bowl of homemade veggie soup will be another portion, a bowl of salad or a half cup of vegetables, whether they're frozen or fresh, will be a portion. So if you're sitting there and you're like, how in God's earth am I supposed to do that? Hopefully I can give you some ideas. So how that might materialize, you might look to add something like a piece of fruit in at breakfast, or if you're having eggs in the morning, you might just add some spinach or some salad to it. We'll look to maybe have fruit as a snack, or indeed you could have some vegetables as a snack alongside hummus or some nut butter. And we want to include plenty of vegetables in our lunch and dinner. So if you're having a sandwich at lunch, can we make sure that we have some sort of salad or vegetables in that salad or in that sandwich or wrap or whatever it might be? And maybe we'll pair it with some vegetable soup. If you're sitting there and you're going, I'd probably get about 2 portions at best, like on a day, like, you know, that's a good day. That's fine. Maybe jumping to six isn't the the aim of the game for you today. Maybe it's a case of, okay, well, I can see why I should improve my fruit and vegetable intake. So I'm going to aim for 3 portions a day. And while that's not six, it's still a step in the right direction. And it's still an improvement on what you're doing. And you know, those kind of small changes are more sustainable, and I suppose the more consistent we can be with positive um I suppose application in and around our diet, the better we are in on a whole. So don't underestimate the power of those small changes, even if it means you're not where you eventually would like to get to, or where, you know, the gold standard would be, so to speak. Don't let that discourage you. These small steps really, really go a long way, because at the end of the day, consistency is key when it comes to our diet. So we want to make sure that what we're doing for the most part is benefiting us, and we can be a bit flexible thereafter. So just to give you an idea, if I'm looking to get my carbohydrates, my protein, my fat in there, my veggies, this is what maybe your bowl could look like, or your plate. And again, the quantities will change depending on activity levels, your preferences. You know, some of you might prefer, you know, nuts and seeds maybe over carbohydrates, or vice versa. So it's just about, I suppose, figuring out what your preferences are, what they look like, and just how can we maybe get a mix of nutrients where possible at each of our meals. Hydration then is another piece that we tend to be quite poor at. So I even see this working in like elite sport. You've athletes there who are just don't meet their fluid intake or their hydration needs. So it's quite, you know, irrespective of, I suppose, across the board, it's an area that we really can get an easy win with, because we're very fortunate that, you know, we've got water accessible to us for the more times than not. So it's an easy win on that front. Do we think, true or false, do we think that drinking tea will dehydrate our bodies? Do you think that statement is true, or do we think it's false? I'll just click in. Okay, okay, mixed bag again. We've got trues and we've got falses. So we're on the fence with this one. So it's actually false. So because tea contains caffeine, caffeine's a diuretic, it was thought that, well, that's just going to, you know, flush the water straight out. But the amount of caffeine in comparison to the amount of fluid, there's actually a net hydrating effect. And the same goes for something like an Americano, not so much an espresso. So sorry, there's very little fluid in that one. So you can't say that that's going to contribute to your overall fluid intake, but something like a tea or a coffee will. So hopefully that's a bit of good news of a Wednesday afternoon. And I suppose why we're looking at hydration, or why it's something that we want to maybe nail and, you know, improve upon if it needs to be improved upon, is because there's consequences, or I suppose negative knock-on effects, when we're even dehydrated slightly. So 2%, like 2% is very small, but we can get symptoms like headaches or dizziness. We might feel lethargic. So again, if we go back to performance, that's not really conducive with you kind of working efficiently, getting through whatever's thrown your way, and having plenty of time then for other things that you might enjoy. Your skin, eyes, mouth might be dry, muscle cramping. So again, whether you're, you know, particularly if you're active, that is not going to be ideal if you're pulling up with muscle cramps when you're trying to get a gym session done, a running session, whatever it might be. Your focus is off when we're dehydrated. How difficult exercise feels is exaggerated when we're dehydrated. Our immune system, so our saliva is our first line of defense. So our immune system is compromised if we're dehydrated, and our concentration is off too. So again, going back to that performance piece, you performing to the best of your ability each and every day, it can be compromised by something as small as not drinking enough fluid. So again, how I suppose aware of your hydration are you over the course of the day? Do you feel like you drink regularly? is this an easy win for you? And is this your take home from today's session? So ways I suppose you can improve it, or nudges that we can get, is actually looking at your urine. So when you go, well, it's not very glamorous. I know, I know, I know. Well, we all have to go to the bathroom. We all go. You might have a look from time to time. So the next time you do, the color will mean something. So if it's a pale kind of yellow to clear color, you're doing a good job. If it's, that darker, more prominent yellow, you need to up your game on the fluid intake front. It might be dark in the morning, that's fine. It's over the course of the day that we want to see it lightening up. Keep a bottle of water beside you. So I always have one on my desk. Maybe that's an easy win for you. Or keep it in your bag if you're moving from A to B in between meetings and so on. Tea and coffee will contribute to your overall fluid intake, as I said. Adding a flavor to your water. If it tastes nicer, you're more likely to drink it. The same goes something like having a bottle of water on your desk. If it's cold, it's more palatable, it's more enjoyable, and you're more likely to drink it. Things like fruit, vegetables, soups, smoothies, they'll also contribute to your fluid intake too, and help you with your hydration targets. So I suppose to kind of start wrapping up today's session and, taking maybe the practical, tangible side of things that step further, we'll hopefully look at a few areas where we can, maybe make small improvements that over time we're going to reap the rewards for. So things like maybe snack choices, that might be an area for improvement. So before anyone is getting stressed at me trying to swap out everything that they deem to be nice, that isn't what I'm doing. But when it comes to, I suppose, nutrition, we want to make sure that the framework of our diet is supporting our needs. So after that, we can add in foods that maybe aren't as nutritious, but they're enjoyable. And that's another important fact of food. Food is there to be enjoyed. So I'm not losing sight of that either. But it's more so if you're someone who, if your snacks look like maybe the left-hand side of my screen, and you tend to reach for crisps or foods that aren't overly nutritious more times than not, well, then maybe making a swap, even if it's just one, you're swapping out one of those scenarios a day, that would be a great step in the right direction. So if you have 2 packets of crisps, maybe swapping one of them out for popcorn, that would be an easy win and a step in the right direction. So it doesn't need to be everything gets the boot to be healthy. Health is multifaceted. There's many factors that we need to consider, when it comes to our overall well-being. But I suppose from a dietary standpoint, if we can supply ourselves with nutrient-dense options more times than not, or at least if that's our framework, by and large, when it's possible, well, then we're doing a good job. So this is just maybe to give you a bit of thought. If you're kind of even in a habit of just picking up maybe the same old snacks that aren't very nutrient dense, well, hopefully this gives you an idea as maybe what you might be able to swap them in with. So something like might be a case of a handful of nuts, or you're going to have a piece of fruit because you've identified, okay, well, maybe I could do a little bit better on that front. We might have some veggie sticks with some hummus. Again, if you're working from home, some of these options might be even easier, again, because you're in the comfort of your own home, particularly boiled eggs. Like, I don't know if you'd be overly welcome coming into work with a bag of boiled eggs. I don't know if the smell would go down well with colleagues, but definitely if you're in the comfort of your own home, it might make it a little bit easier. And then when you're on the go, some options maybe to look out for that are also available in the likes of, local shops. So if you're going to a deli, can we look to include a protein source in our sandwich? Can we maybe opt for a whole grain carbohydrate option? So a seeded bread or a brown bread versus maybe a white bread option, just to help with our fiber intake. Can we add some salad to that? Will I pick up some soup? I've highlighted there's a kind of a cappuccino and then an Americano as a swap. That's all context driven. But say if you're someone who's looking to manage your overall energy intake, that might be an easy win for you, or might be a bit lighter and you might feel a little bit better as well. With the likes of the fizzy drinks, water is the best option. If you do enjoy a fizzy drink, though, a diet alternative is probably a good shout in terms of helping you manage your overall energy intake, your overall sugar intake, and in terms of the additives or the sweeteners, there's the word, that are added to them, they're all tightly regulated. So I know at one point they got kind of blown up in the media, as being really, really negative. But and they are, if there is large quantities of them. But everything is very tightly regulated here, that it's not something that to be worrying about on that front. And it can be an easy win for you to enjoy something like a Coke, but maybe manage your overall energy intake and overall sugar intake too, by going for a Coke Zero, say for example, and you still get the sweetness and the taste. Um, One thing that people struggle with is portion sizes. So one really easy tool that maybe some of you haven't come across before is actually using your hand. I have to apologize. I look battered here. My hands are in bits from the training that I'm doing at the minute. So apologies. They look a bit worse for wear. But when we're looking at maybe a portion of fat and what that looks like for us, again, our hand's going to be in proportion to us as the individual that you are. So a portion of fat would be the size of your thumb. Then we might look at our palm to give us an idea of maybe what a portion of protein might look like. And you can use your fist then for carbohydrates. So that might be a useful tool, because I know sometimes portions can cause a bit of a headache for some. Another way is maybe just changing up the cutlery that you're using, or the Tupperware, whatever it might be. If you've got a large plate, it can maybe make your portion sizes look a bit miserable. Whereas if we go for a little bit of a smaller, maybe a more regular sized plate or bowl or whatever it might be, all of a sudden food looks a lot more attractive because it looks plentiful. Vegetables is actually another way to add a load of bulk to your meal and make it look really satisfying too, without adding a load of energy to it. But again, that's all context driven. That won't be applicable or even needed for some of you, but it's just to maybe share that for those who might be interested. When it comes to being prepared, or I suppose to help you action what we've discussed today, there's a few things that we can do. So the first is actually make a list before you go to the shop. Very often we just walk in and we'll just pull, whatever we fancy at the time or what we normally go for. Well, if you're going through that food, excellent. If it's provided in your needs, excellent. But if it's actually something that you haven't thought about, spending 5-10 minutes before you go to the shop the next time and go, well, what am I actually cooking this week? Am I out? What am I looking to have as a snack? And just making a little bit of a plan. And once you do it once or twice, it'll become a lot easier and take a lot less time than when you get into a rhythm that suits you. So just having a bit of a thought as to, am I eating out? Am I at home? What do I need to be prepared for? And what options can I provide myself to help with maybe how I'm feeling and the goals that I have. Batch cooking meals and snacks can be hugely helpful. Using your fridge and freezer as a support there can be really useful. So we're busy, there's a lot going on. Is there a time though in the week that you've got a bit more time at hand? So say Monday nights, I'm not doing anything. I've got the evening free, so I might actually make a big pot of something and it'll do me for a few meals, so that when I am super busy on a Wednesday and Thursday, that I've got something to pull from and I'm not depending on, kind of picking up something as I go or figuring it out along the way. Um, we didn't touch on sleep today, but one thing from a sleep quality standpoint that we'd like to avoid would be looking at your screen before bed. So maybe a way for you to help both the quality of your sleep and also to help with your preparation would be maybe to fit in some time to look at maybe what your schedule looks like and where you might need to be prepared, or what areas you might need to be prepared for. And then convenient options are helpful, because if you do find that you're stuck or pushed for time, having things like frozen vegetables at hand to throw into your meal can be useful. Tuna for a protein source, long shelf life, can be super helpful. Tomatoes to make up a sauce, and so on. So have you got convenient options for backup if things don't go to plan? But you know, you've got them there as backup, so you can still work towards your goals and support your needs and feel the better of it. So as I mentioned, if you've got some downtime over the week, or at some point, can you make a big batch of something so you don't have to cook every day, and you've sorted even a day or two of meals for yourself and indeed maybe your family. You can freeze the meals that you cook after you've let them cool down, and they'll stay in the freezer for up to 3 months, which is really helpful. And then just change up the sides so you don't feel like you're eating the same thing over and over again. So today's take homes, what has stood out to you? Reflect today, or you do it now. What has stood out? What was said? What was discussed? What do we look at that you go, geez, like that's actually so easy and I don't do it, but there's benefit to it. Write them down and, you know, work on them one by one if there's more than one to aim for. We want to look at including protein in each of our main meals to help support our lean tissue, our bone health, to make sure that we're feeling satisfied after those meals. Fluid and hydration is a really easy win. If it's not something that you're great at, that's a really nice way, or a really maybe a good area to focus on to help with your overall performance on a day-to-day basis. Can we aim for 6 or more portions of fruit and veg a day? As I said, if you're in around 2 or 3, aiming for an extra portion on top of that is perfect and a great kind of action point from today. And where is possible, taking time to just take a moment and look at the days that are ahead to see what you need to organize yourself for, and to see maybe where the gaps in your diary lie, to maybe make informed decisions, or indeed to prepare something for the times that are a bit more hectic. So that's it from me today. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to stay on and discuss them with you. Thank you so much to both Iconic Offices and TrainMate for having me in today, and it was a pleasure. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's session too. Thank you so much.